Welcome to Say It With Guitars. I'm your host, Pete Cornelius. Each episode, I'll be digging deep and getting to hang with some of Australia's finest guitar pickers, songwriters, producers, collectors, and makers. I look forward to bringing you these fun conversations and I hope you enjoy Say It With Guitars. Yeah, g'day folks. Thank you again. Nearly getting through winter. The days are getting longer. Surf gods have been out. It's been pumping out there. It's been lovely and cold. You know, put on a good wetty, happy days. So speaking of cold, spent the weekend up at the Snow. There's a little place called Ben Lomond here in Tasmania. Played a fun little solo show there. Took the family up and the kids got to play in the white stuff. And speaking of gigs and things, announced recently a little tour to Queensland, which is going to be great. Always look forward to getting up there and playing with the local fellas, making a good racket. So yeah, please keep an eye on the gig guide, folks. And today's guest, Matt Fell. I've actually, it's very timely. I've just been working with Matt on a few of my songs. So yeah, hope you enjoy our conversation today, folks. Before we crack into today's show, I'd like to shout out to our sponsor, Mr. Billy Tarrant from Tarrant Guitars. Billy's an amazing luthier and he makes some real sweet instruments. I'm lucky enough for him to have built me a 00 size acoustic guitar, which I've dragged all around the country and it's sounding better than ever. So yeah, check out tarrantguitars.net.au, Tassie's one-stop custom workshop for custom-made guitars, all guitar repairs and services. Let's get into the show. All right, I'd like to welcome to today's podcast, Say It With Guitars, Mr. Matt Fell. Matt, how you doing?
I'm great, Pete.
Excellent.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thanks for inviting us into your lovely abode, Chat Guitars.
My pleasure.
All things with strings.
Yeah.
So, it's funny, a few conversations we've had prior to today, you were like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I don't know anything about guitar. It's not my bag, but I beg to differ. I reckon you know a bit more than you're sort of giving away. Not necessarily about the technical side of guitar, but about the joy that can bring someone or the embellishment it can bring to a song or, you know, a character that not necessarily a guitar, even like a stringed instrument, because perhaps we should even like open the can of worms of the instrument that you've the 8-string ukulele. Like you should just like break the ice straight away.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about that.
Well, it's a bizarre thing. I bought that. I was working with I've forgotten her name now. A New Zealand singer-songwriter, and I was over in Auckland doing a radio promo tour with her, and went to this music store and found this 8-string ukulele, which this was quite a long time ago, at least 10 years ago now.
Yeah.
I'd never seen one before, and as soon as I picked it up, you know when you have that connection with an instrument where it's like, oh, this was either made for me or I was made to play this thing.
Yeah.
And because there's a few things in my life that I feel like sort of belong in the too hard basket, and that's learning how to play double bass, pedal steel, and mandolin, learning a new tuning.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't have time to learn a new tuning, and that just seems like way too hard. So I instantly felt like this instrument was an amazing cross between a ukulele, and I love playing ukuleles, and mandolin, and I loved the idea of the mandolin, just not the actual mechanics of learning it. Yeah. And so I just started playing this thing on almost every record I did, and in a track it just sounds exactly like a mandolin, but not exactly. It's got its own thing. I found it's the perfect accompaniment to a normal 6-string acoustic in a lot of tracks.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a better vibe than a 12-string.
Yep.
12 strings are a difficult beast to tame.
Yes.
And as much as I love them, they don't always translate in a recorded setting. It has to be really for a specific song for it to work.
Yep.
So I just found this combination of acoustics and the 8-string just amazing. Really, either playing, melodic stuff or just banging away on the chords.
Yeah.
And more evocative and interesting than just playing like a ukulele or something.
Yeah.
It just gives a track this whole other thing. And then a couple of years after that, I started playing it live with people like John Williamson and Shane Nicholson, Shane mostly. And then before I knew it, I was playing it all the time, and now I'm playing it with the Whitlam's Black Stump Band on a couple of songs. And the thing that I find really cool about it, though, is that I never ever run it through a DI. Like, to me, it just sounds lame.
Right. So you go into an amp.
Into an amp.
Ah.
With tremolo and delay and reverb and the whole deal.
So you're treating it like an electric instrument.
100%.
Wow.
And I absolutely love it. And
That's
for some bizarre reason, it never feeds back. Yeah. I don't know why, but it doesn't.
I guess the soundboard's so small that it doesn't have time to feedback or something like that.
And it for some reason, it translates in a lot of different musical settings, like in ballads, it's really nice. But then I've used it, like especially with Shane's band, where we've got the full band going on. There's an acoustic and 2 electric guitars and drums and bass. Yeah. And I overdrive it a little bit. Yeah. I'm through the amp, and it's just this glorious thing with tons of delay and all the rest of it. It sounds kind of space age and so it's just become very unexpectedly like probably the instrument that I feel closest to now.
That's fantastic, isn't it? Like to find something like that and then to take it where you've taken it as an extension of what you do, you know, and it's tiny, like it's like a backpack, you know, you could sort of hop on a bus and take it with you. You know, camping, it's like this tiny little thing that just has a register, has a tone. And if you can do so much with it, it's not just like a one-trick pony, it's like a...
Yeah, it's so flexible.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It is really cool. And I love that it's a bit unique, you know. Yeah. You don't really see them that often. And
no.
Yeah.
No, well, maybe we will.
Yeah.
The Matt Fell signature. And speaking of signatures and stuff, we were talking just before we started, probably not signature, but you've been talking to a local luthier, Mr. Billy Tarrant, about getting an 8-string bouzouki getting made. So that's kind of like a similar approach to the ukulele, but I guess longer scale, steel strings, mandolin-ish in its tone.
Yeah.
That'll be a blast. That'll be a whole lot of fun as well. Hopefully that can do what the uke does, but perhaps maybe...
Yeah, look, I can't wait. It's in my mind, it's going to be an extension of that instrument.
Yeah.
With a much bigger range.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm going to sort of try and treat it as like a sort of a mandocello kind of vibe, which I don't have, but it's on the list. But I've always loved the sound of the bouzouki.
Yeah.
And after seeing Jeff Lang play it with William Crichton, who's a really good friend of mine, and he and I talking about it, and I thought I just have to have this in my life, you know. It has to happen, and especially seeing Jeff doing a similar thing when he's playing it live, it just doesn't sound like an acoustic plugged into a DI. It's got he's got stuff going on there.
Yeah,
you know,
he loves to manipulate a signal path and tweak it and make it, you know, unrecognizable almost as the instrument that it started as.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, and I'm really looking forward to playing that live as well. I think it'd be great. But
exciting,
especially in the studio. Yeah. One of my favourite things, and I kind of didn't realise I was doing this until a few years ago, but I absolutely love putting folk instruments in a non-folk context. Mm-hmm. It's one of the things that musically excites me the most. Banjos, 12-string mandolins, the 8-string.
Yep.
I seem to have kind of stumbled upon a thing, which I'm sure I'm not the only one that's doing it, but it feels unique in my brain that putting these instruments into country, alt country sort of stuff in a sort of a different way is something that really kind of gets my creative juices flowing, and Excellent. It's something I want to explore a lot more. The bouzouki was the next step for that.
Yeah, fantastic.
I'm really keen to, after this, to talk to Billy in the future about making more things like that.
Yeah, yeah. I have heard like T-Bone Burnett does a similar approach. Not on all his recordings. He's such a crazy producer who comes up with some crazy sort of concoctions of sounds and tones. But I have heard, him using like bluegrass bands and old Americana bands on popular rocker records, stuff like that. And I think, I think we're ready for that.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's what drives art and music forward is things that are put in places where they don't necessarily belong.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was flying the other day and I was looking through some of the online, through their app, all the entertainment they have on, and they had this series about the auto-tune and how that was created just to help singers stay in pitch. Whereas it took someone to manipulate that software to take it where it wasn't meant to be, someone like T-Pain and they started using this software and it started sounding like a robot or like a whole another sound that no one was ready for. Or maybe not was ready for, but, they used what it was designed for.
In a way it wasn't intended.
The way it wasn't intended.
Yeah.
And that's how artistic it became,
100%.
So I think that's really exciting.
Yeah.
Using instruments like that.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we're going to have a quick chat about what got you to where you are today, Matt. Maybe can I give you a little intro to where I first heard your work?
Sure.
That classic story of everyone, driving along, listening to the radio and they pull over the car, that kind of story. Well, that happened to me. I was coming home from St. Helens. I was teaching at the time. So I finished some lessons and on the factory floor, Graham Connors came on the radio.
Ah.
I was like, whoa, what is this? I thought it was like a Ry Coodery kind of American sounding production, and then it was Graham Connors. I was like, hang on a minute, he's Australian. So I, did a quick Google and found out who played on it and who produced it and stuff like that, and your name was on that list. And and then a lot of mutual friends, and then we finally got to meet each other at Tamworth for, I think it was one of Shane's gigs at the pub.
That's right.
And our mutual friend Jeremy Edwards, I was up there playing with him, and Jeremy's like, Matt's going to move to Tassie. Maybe you should, have a chat sometime. And that was probably a few years ago now. But yeah, that was my first sort of introduction, was hearing that record. I was like, wow, that's really cool. So maybe can you give us a little insight as to perhaps your work on Australian records? What's been exciting you throughout your career producing and things like that?
Well, I can take you back a little bit more if you like. It might make a bit more sense. I moved to Sydney when I was about 21 after going to uni in Lismore.
Right,
doing the course
Southern Cross.
Yep.
Yep.
And I remember reading an interview, and I think it was with. I have a funny feeling it was with someone like Billy Sheen or someone like that. And someone had asked him, what advice would you give young aspiring musicians? And he said, well, just never say no.
Yeah.
So I moved to Sydney and I just never said no to anything. And for probably about 10 years, I was I was mostly working as just a freelance musician, mostly on bass, but sometimes on guitar, and I just did every single imaginable gig that was offered to me, regardless of if I was right for it or not.
Yeah.
And I did love doing that. My back didn't love doing it because unfortunately Fender hadn't made those really light bass amps at the time. But it was a great thing for me in terms of getting into record production because I had to be across everything.
Yeah.
No matter what the style was or genre or situation, I had to be able to hold my own in it. But all the while I was doing that, I was building my recording setup, starting with a 4-track cassette to 8-track to 1 8-at, then 2 8-ats, then 3 8-ats, and eventually to what I have now. And I was doing a lot of demos for friends, and then eventually that turned into doing a couple of independent records.
Yeah.
And as I kind of went on, I realised that as much as I loved playing live, that production was where it was at for me, and the sort of the balance between gigging and production sort of went the other way, and to the point where I was mostly just producing. And when I was in bands in high school, I wasn't the most popular because I would always be telling everyone what to do, being a little bit bossy, and
Right.
and sometimes going over and taking an instrument off them and saying, no, it's supposed to be like this, play it like this.
Yep.
And and I also was completely obsessed with Crowded House, but I was torn because I could never decide if I wanted to be a drummer or a bass player or a guitarist. I knew I wouldn't be a songwriter, but I didn't know which of those I wanted to be. And so over time I kind of realised, well, I can just be all of them. I don't have to be stuck on one thing. But what really turned me on about those records was the sound of them and the way they were arranged and all the keyboard parts and everything else. And then I started to realise what a producer was.
Yep.
And thought, no, that's where I belong. That's what I want to be doing.
Yep.
I think it's just production is just such an exciting job most of the time. Sometimes it's a bit mind-numbing, but most of the time it's pretty great.
Yeah.
Because you're creating a world, you know.
You start with nothing, right?
You're starting with absolutely nothing, and the only thing you've got to go off is what happens to be rolling around in your head.
Yes.
And what you're reacting to.
It could be different every day.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, your reaction could be different depending on how you feel and what you've eaten.
Well, there is limitless roads you can go down.
Yeah.
And while that sort of sounds kind of ridiculous and terrifying, I really love that. I think that kind of endless possibilities is a pretty magical place to be.
Exciting, yeah.
Yeah. And to be able to sort of let your imagination run wild and create something that is timeless, not in the sense that it's that good necessarily, but one of the things I love about recording is that you are preserving moments in time.
Yeah.
You're preserving creativity, and it will always be there. Some of it maybe shouldn't always be there, but
who are we to judge?
Who are we to judge?
That's
and
right.
it's there.
Yeah.
As opposed to playing live where the second you play a note, it's gone and you're never going to get it back.
Yeah.
It just disappears into the ether and that's it.
It's a whole different mindset, isn't it?
Completely. You're 100% in the moment.
Yes.
And that moment is gone as soon as it happens. In the studio, you're trying, even though they are completely different, you are still trying to capture that essence. You are still trying to be in that moment.
Yeah.
But it's preserved, so it's a very different thing. I don't know if that answered your question at all. You might want to re-record the question. But yeah, it's still. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, and you know, it is hard work. It can be quite exhausting, mentally exhausting, especially the amount that I often end up doing.
Yeah.
Where I've got. It's not unusual for me to have 10 different records on the go at the same time.
Yep.
But it's still pretty wonderful, you know. I really do. When it works, it's pretty great.
Yeah. And it's probably actually good having a few different projects on the go at the same time, so you're not over obsessing about one thing and one sound, or just oversaturating yourself with one particular album or artist. You're sort of spreading yourself around, so you're constantly being, thrown around between different projects. So
absolutely, because I mean, music is a big, broad, and beautiful thing, and if I had to make the same music all the time, I'd go crazy. I'd get so bored.
Yeah.
I'm lucky that I get to do a bunch of different things. I might do a really modern, slick record one day and then move on to something really raw the next.
Yeah.
And I find that when you're doing that, you approach the other one in a fresher way.
Yes.
So it is actually a good thing. Sometimes it's a little bit too much.
Yeah.
But for the most part,
Yeah.
it is great to be able to skate around.
Yeah.
You know, and do different things.
So what do you think sparked that interest to be a producer? I know you talked about playing different instruments and sort of conducting the band almost from your instrument. Were there particular records that you heard and went, wow, that's a cool vibe, or that's a cool sound, or how are they getting that thing together? Like, was there any, a particular record you think that?
Oh yeah, I mean, it was Temple of Low Men by Crowded House.
Okay.
That record, like, that's the most important record in my collection and in my brain for sure. You know, you have those albums where you could, if there was technology available that you could download it from your head into a computer, it would sound exactly the same as the actual record.
Right.
Because I'd listened to it that many times. I know exactly what's happening at every second.
Yeah.
Without realising it, I studied that album to a ridiculous length, you know.
Yeah.
I think that album for me really kind of opened my eyes to the possibility of what is available in a recording environment. I didn't actually really know it at the time, but when I went to uni and when I started doing a little bit of recording myself, I found I kept coming back to that instinctively. The other one is Lindsey Buckingham,
Right.
who's a massive influence on me.
Right. Yeah.
As a arranger
Yep.
and as a guitar player. I'm nowhere near the guitar player he is, but I hear stuff that I do all the time and think, I totally ripped that off him.
Yeah.
Like his style seeped into mine.
Yeah.
I don't have his technique and his brilliance, but he's influenced me in a massive way. The thing about Lindsey Buckingham is that when you listen to those Fleetwood Mac records and to his solo records, his guitar is like a hook machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he is always referencing the vocal, like all the time. Almost every single thing he does is in service to the vocal, even if you don't kind of realise it.
Yeah.
When you actually listen to it and analyse it, that's what he's doing all the time. His guitar parts are dancing around what the vocal melody is doing, complementing it, and that's a thing that I found myself doing.
Right.
Which I realised later that I completely got from him.
Yep.
Just from obsessing over those records so much.
Yep. So that's not necessarily a learnt thing you've sort of sat down and worked
No,
out.
not
It's
at
just
all.
something that's just been absorbed in from oversaturation of his playing or the
Completely.
records.
Yeah, absolutely. That was, I mean, Rumours was probably the first album, apart from a bunch of Beatles records and some other things, that I think I really, as a kid, thought, what is this? This is really something.
Yeah.
And would play it all the time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's definitely kind of seeped into my brain and my musical vocabulary in a huge way.
Yeah.
But I've never been very good at. I was never one of those musicians that learnt other people's parts. I don't know. It was just a lot of guitarists become really good at what they do by learning stuff and working it out on the guitar. And I just never seemed to be able to do that. I wasn't really. Maybe I wasn't interested in doing it. I don't know. And I wish I had have, because like I'm a really lousy lead guitar player. Like I'm so shit at it, and I really wish I was good. And if I'd done that when I was younger, I might have been okay. But I just can't do it.
Yeah, right. It is one of those like the guitar is such a crazy instrument. Like it really is. It can do everything, and yeah, like solos and things like that. Like to be honest, I actually haven't given enough time to that period of Fleetwood Mac. I'm a big fan of the early Fleetwood Mac, the Peter Green, Jeremy Spencer sort of period stuff when it was like a Chicago blues band. And then when I found out there was a later version with girls singing and there was like pop songs, I was really confused. So I need to go back.
How old
as
are you,
an
Pete?
adult. Yeah, how old am I now? So I need to actually go back and properly analyse that music, because it not only is it catchy, but like it's it's actually really well put together, produced songs that are timeless, like you talked about.
Yeah.
And I remember watching a video, it must have been on DVD, of Fleetwood Mac and Lindsay playing that strange-looking acoustic/electric guitar thing he had. I was just blown out. Like, what is this bizarre instrument? Like, so yeah, I think I need to go back and.
The interesting thing, and I hadn't really thought about this until now, is that in a lot of ways he plays guitar like a producer or an arranger or a songwriter, but he has all the technical ability and he's obviously amazing, but he's 100% in service of the song all the time.
Yeah.
And I think as a producer, that's the number one job.
Yeah.
You know, you are, and as a musician, obviously, in every aspect of playing music, we're in service of the song.
Yeah.
But there are some people whose style reflects that more, and for me, he's 100% that.
Yeah. That's definitely one thing I think that gets lost a little bit as a guitarist or the guitar as a tool can, you know, it can get a little bit egotistical, and it's like, I'm the guitar player, I'm going to play what I want, you know, instead of the song being the number one core of why everyone's here playing together.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it does get lost in technicality a lot.
Yeah. And look, it's a lot of times it's just really about having both. If having technicality can inform and should inform you in a beautiful musical way, that where you're able to do both, you know.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know, for me, maybe because I never learned how to be technical and then just didn't feel like that was something I could do.
Yeah.
That I tried to make up for it in other ways, and perhaps that's sort of influenced my approach to guitar.
Yeah.
You know.
Which I think is fantastic. And sometimes that's where some of the best emotive or, you know, close to the soul kind of stuff comes out, because you're not relying on licks and pre-learnt, you know, patterns and things like that. You're sort of just going, all right, cool, what do I feel like playing?
Yeah.
And how can I translate that to my instrument?
Yeah, definitely. Having said that, I'm not going to lie. I mean, I would love to be able to have your brain or Ollie Thorpe's or many other guitarist brains where you hear something in your head and your fingers automatically can do it. So maybe I'm just trying to compensate, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, I would love to have Ollie on the show too. I might get in touch because he's a great player, and from what I haven't met the guy, but what I've seen online of his playing and his approach to that and pedal steel and all that stuff.
He's a machine. So he and I are in the Whitlam's Black Stump band together, and I'm playing bass with them, and he's on guitar and pedal steel.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know Ollie that well until a couple of years ago, and I got him into play on the record. And then when we decided we're going to start touring, and he's just a gift.
Yeah.
Because he is one of those people that is completely in tune musically, completely adept at his instrument, and it just flows through him.
Yeah.
He's reliable and dependable, but he's also wild and free, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a magical combination. So when he plays, he's skating on the edge.
Yes.
But he can also come right back to the center when he needs to. And yeah, it's just a thrill being on stage with him every night.
That'd be a treat. Like you said, to be on the edge of the precipice, you know, every night or whatever. Like if someone's that good at their instrument, it's always going to be exciting and energetic, and you know.
Well, it's an amazing thing that we found with this band, with the Whitlam's Black Stump band, because you know everybody in the band we've got Terapie Richmond on drums,
fantastic,
and Rod McCormick on acoustic and banjo.
Great.
So, you know, no one there is messing around.
Yeah.
You know,
it's business.
Like this is a good bunch of musicians.
Yeah.
And playing with these guys every night, it's been amazing because it's the best band I've ever been in. And we've gotten to a point now where it's really tight. You know, when you play with a bunch of people enough and it gets incredibly tight. but at the same time, it's really loose.
Yeah.
And so we're constantly changing and evolving the songs, and everyone's is free to go off and explore something. But you start getting that communication going where there'll be nights when two people in the band at the same time, without telling the other person, decided to try something completely different in this song, and they both did the same thing, and you just kind of look around and go, how did that happen? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
So that is a pretty wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And I'm really love it. I've really fallen in love with playing live again because that. But since COVID ended, actually, I've just actually loved getting out and playing again. Whereas I was kind of a bit off it for a while. But
yeah, I was going to ask you how do you balance like the live work and the studio work, because you've probably been in the studio working on records for the bulk of your career. Obviously playing special live shows here and there, but I've noticed lately you've been back on the road playing lots of shows with no doubt friends and people that you want to hang out with.
Well, that's the number one thing for me.
Yeah. So you've got the chance to be selective now, and
I only go out and play with friends.
Yeah.
And people that I enjoy hanging out with.
Great.
And what is really nice for me is that, I only play with Josh Pike, and I've been his guitarist for 15 years now, and play keys with him as well. Shane Nicholson and the Whitlams, and a couple of other things maybe, but that's kind of it.
Yeah.
But they're all completely different.
Yeah.
Which is great, Josh's gig is not technical at all. I love doing his thing because I'm the only colour instrument in the band. And so we've developed ways of playing his songs, and his songs have lots of overdubs in them.
Yeah.
But I've worked out how to combine often 2 or 3 parts into one. And I really, really get off on that on the guitar. That's one of my favourite things to do is arpeggiating, ringing notes, combining parts together.
And are these parts you've created in the studio? Or are they someone else's parts?
No, they're basically parts that he and I, sometimes he would direct me and other times I would just kind of make them up myself. But just listening to the record and going, okay, well, there's 3 guitar parts happening here and there's a keyboard part. Obviously, I'm only one person. I can only do one thing. Yeah. But what's the most important information that has to come across? And is there a way sometimes that I can do both? And sometimes there is. And I'm lucky with him that because I've always been, as a guitar player, I've never been a lead player. I've never been strictly a rhythm player. My favourite thing is actually sort of arpeggiating a lot, ringing notes, that kind of thing. Similar to what the Edge does, just obviously nowhere near as good. But I love his approach to guitar. Okay. That he's creating more than just what one guy should be doing. Yeah. And so with Josh, I get in that mindset. And there's one song of his, I Thought I Was a River, I think it's called, and in most of the song there's 3 guitar parts happening at the same time, and they're all quite critical. And so I've worked out how to do all 3 of them kind of at the same time. Not that I'm playing them all at the same time, but get that bit, get that bit, get that bit. Yep. And it becomes its own thing and it works. Yep. And so I really love playing his gig because it's really challenging in that respect. Yep. It's not technically challenging, which suits me because I'm not a gifted technical guitarist. But to be able to create enough scope and sound to fill a stage when I'm the only one there doing it, because we've just got drums and bass and acoustic and that's it. Cool. That's a thrill to me. I really, really dig that.
And that's a great space to be in because you're kind of skating on the edge of like creativity as well, because sort of you've got all that domain to yourself. Like you're the only sort of treble instrument almost. But then you've got parts that you've written and you want to stick to the parts, and you're sort of, and I'm sure night to night things can vary. And how do you go about like tones and like when you're playing in that environment? Do you try and like make it as full and fat as you can, or like with big delays and reverbs?
100%. Yeah. The best thing that ever happened for me with Josh was getting a line 6 pedal board that meant I could press a button and I'd have a completely different sound.
Sure.
Before that, I was tap dancing like a maniac all night.
Yeah.
As soon as I was able to press one button and then it was the opposite sound of what I just had or whatever, that just completely opened it up.
So presets for each song?
Yeah.
Sort of thing? Yeah, okay.
Totally.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'd have the first chorus, bridge, whatever mapped out. So that was a real game changer. I mean, I could get more creative with it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't limited to having 8 or 9 pedals on a board.
That's right.
So yeah, it is very creatively rewarding. It doesn't change much night to night. It's pretty much the same every time.
Yep.
The only thing that ever changes in Josh's set is there are a few songs that I'm kind of soloing and playing lead guitar and that'll just sort of be what it is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. Being in the studio all the time is good for a while, and then it gets getting back to your original question, like it just gets a bit too much. So I've really loved getting out and playing again.
Yeah. That instant energy, you just can't replace that, can you? Like when you're on stage with your friends and to have a crowd, not necessarily a big crowd, just a crowd of engaged people that are instantly reacting to what you're doing. It's such a treat.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
And as much as I love that, I have to say I equally enjoy having 3 hours sometimes in a hotel room where I can just watch a TV show and not do anything. Yeah. Or I can go out for a walk and find a cafe, or like I think from a life perspective, I've really loved it.
Yeah.
Just to get outside, really, because when you're producing, you are stuck inside a lot of the time, and so it kind of gives me a bit of a break.
Yeah.
And it also gives me a social interaction, which is important as human beings. And
it certainly is.
And if you can do that with people that you love, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really dig it.
You and was it Michael Carpenter had the Love Hurts studio in Sydney, right? How long was that? Like almost 20 year?
It was 20 years, almost exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. In the same facility, same space?
Yeah, it started out, we started it together.
Yep.
And I had a control. It was interesting because at the time, the studio model was the traditional commercial studio.
Yeah.
Where you've got the mixing desk and you've got all the outboard gear and you've got the big live room.
Yeah.
And you hope like hell people book it.
Yeah.
And it costs a fortune to run and you're going to lose a lot of money. We had the idea, and I know we weren't the first people to think of this, but it worked for us and not many other people were doing it, which was let's open a studio that isn't going to work as a result of people just coming in and recording. They're going to come in because they want to work with us.
Okay.
Separately and sometimes together, but we thought that a studio should be based around the producer / engineer and not the facility itself.
Yeah.
And for me, I've always worked with singer-songwriters and very rarely with bands. So that made a lot more sense to me in the way that I work.
Yeah.
And we just had, at the time, Michael was playing drums on a lot of the records that I was producing, so his room had a drum area and we had a booth in the middle and we just did our thing.
Cool.
Over time, that grew into 3 more control rooms and another booth.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was unceremoniously demolished this time last year.
Wow.
Yeah, which was tough. I mean, the blow was softened for me because I'd moved here.
Yeah.
And after 20 years, I was getting a little bit tired of running. I never wanted to be a landlord.
Yeah.
But and we were also lucky. I think to get 20 years out of a commercial premises.
Yeah.
In a place like Sydney or Melbourne is pretty good.
Yeah.
And I have so many friends that cannot say the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's tough, you know.
Especially like the last say maybe not the last few years, but like that 2020, that COVID period, so many studios went under and just disappeared, and even time leading up to that. Like I'm sure technology had a massive impact on commercial studios like that.
But also one of the biggest impacts was just residential apartments getting built.
Noise, yeah.
Or not even noise, but like the owner
the price
going,
of real estate and
real estate.
rent.
We're gonna demolish your building because we're gonna build a block of apartments.
Yeah.
I know so many people that happened to.
Right.
And they just had to leave and put all that money in it.
Yeah.
But interestingly, technology, like I guess I look at when we started it 20 years ago, and we were kind of breaking the mold in the sense that we weren't doing a commercial studio thing, and that was able to work for us. But 20 years later, you look at it now, and you think, well, you see how different the environment is now.
Yeah.
And with technology and everything else, I can't even contemplate the idea of having a commercial lease with a recording studio. I mean, that just seems like madness to me.
Yeah. Right.
And the last couple of years in Sydney, I just started selling everything I had.
Yeah.
I had all these microphones and outboard gear and everything else, and it's just like I don't need or want any of this stuff anymore.
Yeah.
And now I've got a studio and I'm upstairs in my house, and I don't think that the records I've done since have suffered in any way, and I'm not paying $6,000 a month in rent. And I before we moved here, I thought there was a studio next door called Linear, which is a great space, and I thought I've never had the big studio, and I'm gonna do it, and I rented it for 2 years, and I had the big control room, which was awesome, had all my stuff in it.
Yep.
Had the live room, the big drum room.
Yep.
And I thought, this is going to be great. I'm finally going to have the big, because Love Hurts was awesome, but it was small. It was really just my room with booths that you had to share with other people and stuff.
Yep.
And I was really excited to do it. And after 18 months, I realized, my God, I've recorded drums in this room like 4 times. What am I doing?
Yeah.
I'm sending everything to Josh Schubert in the Blue Mountains or other drummers that have got great home setups.
Yep.
I'm not having to spend 4 hours setting up microphones and do all this stuff instead of what I should be doing, which is focusing on the music.
Yeah.
And so I think, and now you look around at the incredible music that's getting made, not in studios.
That's right. It's getting outsourced to individuals worldwide.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's incredible.
And there are still enough studios around that if you want to go and track live, you can.
Yep.
And I just did that a couple of weeks ago with the Whitlams, and it was fantastic. We went in a big studio and all played live, and it was beautiful. And you've got that if you need it.
Yeah, but as a person behind that studio, like with that massive rent and big space, and like you said, if you're using the live room 4 times in 18 months, it's a lot of stuff, a lot of overheads. and so much stuff to go wrong. Yeah, that's true. And like you said, time, you've got to mic up the whole kit and things like that.
I can't tell you the number of sessions I've done where everyone's just sitting around for so much of the time.
Yep.
Or this part of the desk isn't working, or this thing isn't working. There's always problems.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever done a session where everything has gone perfectly.
Yeah.
Like ever.
Yeah.
I did so many. And I really don't think it ever once happened where there wasn't some sort of problem.
Yep.
Including plenty of the ones that I produced and engineered myself,
Yep.
So taking that out is a pretty good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, sometimes you can use that to your advantage if you can somehow channel that little bug in the system to your advantage. Like sometimes you can sort of create it like as a laugh or as like a bonding thing or a memory you can look back at. It's probably not great at the time.
Yeah.
But if you can somehow channel that into a positive, we're all human.
Yeah. The ones that I don't like is that it's like, okay, well, it was all feeling really good, and now we've got to go and leave for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And the vibe dies.
Yeah, that would be a killer.
Yeah. Yeah. So, look, the only downside, of course, is in this studio environment that so many of us are working in now is that you don't have the same collaboration and you don't have that same back and forth that happens. Mm-hmm. And I do look back really fondly on a lot of records that I did at Love Hurts with Glenn Hanna and Josh Schubert especially, and Shane Nicholson, where there's no way that what we did would sound the way that it did if we were all doing it separately.
Yeah.
So I think if you're lucky enough to find a group of people that you can have that connection with, and that space to do it in, that is the ideal scenario.
Absolutely.
But I'll just add an assistant engineer
Yeah.
into that, which is the one thing I never had. If I'd had an assistant,
Yep.
I think I would have loved it even more.
Yeah. So did you have to sort of learn on the fly a lot of this, or was this part of the Southern Cross days? Did you learn a lot of engineering tips and tricks and all that sort of stuff there, or was it just pretty much deep end, get in there and get it done?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a little bit of basic engineering 101 at uni, but not much.
Yeah.
And it wasn't my major. I was a bass major anyway. So I've become an engineer by default.
Mm-hmm.
I don't particularly want to be one. I've never wanted to be one, and I would in a perfect world I would have had someone else do it from the start.
Yeah.
But obviously that's not possible, because it's like engineering is the same for guitars for me. Like I'm not overly ashamed to admit that it wasn't that long ago that I realised what the bridge and what the nut was on a guitar. I just never really thought about it. I don't like pickups.
Yeah.
Anything to do with the mechanics of the guitar as an instrument, no thanks.
Sure. Okay.
I just can't go there. Like,
Yep.
I'm full of admiration for people that do, but it's just not me.
Yep.
And it's the same with engineering. Like the thought of spending hours A-Bing microphones,
Yeah.
no thanks.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's fantastic that people do that. It's just not me.
Not in your makeup.
No, but by default, the more you do it, the more you kind of do learn things, and I think it becomes sort of instinctive a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so, I guess it's fair to say that I think I've become an engineer, and sometimes a pretty good one. Sometimes that might be luck, but it's also just because you just do it enough times, you realise, you work out what sounds good,
Yep.
and you start to get a bit of a feel for it.
Yeah.
But I'm not technical in any way.
Yeah.
And, when it comes to, and I mix most of the records that I do, and I really love mixing because I try and approach it as a producer and as an arranger, not necessarily as a technician.
Interesting. Because what's the percentage, say, on the records that you do produce and work on? How many of these records are you seeing the whole mix project yourself, or do you
About 95%.
About 95%.
Maybe even more.
Yep.
I pretty much mix everything I do.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's great.
And I started a long time ago, and I think because I would often get so frustrated with the way things would work in studios.
Yeah.
I found a lot of the time there were too many things that would get in the way of creativity. The main one being, I can't tell you the number of times I do a session and the headphone mix was horrible, or the board mix in the room was terrible.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, this doesn't make sense. Like,
Yeah.
I'm getting brought in to overdub on something or playing with a band. I should know what I'm playing to. And I found so many times that wasn't a priority. So when I started doing it myself, I got really into the idea of mixing right from the start.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're going to play a guitar part, if you're going to do a vocal, it should feel like you're adding to the record, and there's nothing there that's distracting you or getting in the way, or this doesn't feel good, So mixing became kind of an organic process for me that started like from the very beginning. And a lot of times, by the time the song is finished, it's almost there. So
Yep.
it makes sense that I finish it off and mix it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a great concept, and probably a lot of artists would work in a similar way. Like even if they just got a home studio, they kind of, every time you hear that song from start to finish, you'll make a few tweaks and EQ this, or put a bit of reverb on that, or pan something into a particular place. And then if that's what you've become accustomed to and that's the sound that you're projecting, you pass that whole project onto someone else, it might come back a whole different beast.
Yeah.
Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, that's by choice. But yeah, if you've got control of your ideas from the get-go, And yeah, it's a great. I know it's just a great model of working, I think.
I think the most important thing really when it comes to music recording and any sort of creativity is that there are absolutely no rules.
Yeah.
And I remember when I started making records and I had a Digi 001, which was the most basic rudimentary form of Pro Tools recording at the time, but still very powerful.
Yeah.
The number of engineers that told me that, oh, you can't make records on that. Like, I would get it all the time.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
It's a toy.
Yeah.
You know, you can't do that. Like,
Yeah.
And I just thought, well, that's ridiculous because I am making.
Let me
records
prove you
on-
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm putting time into them, and
Yep.
I think it sounds all right. You know, and that technology has just gotten better and better and better. And if you're good at what you do, you can do whatever the hell you want.
Absolutely.
You don't need anybody else to make it better.
Yeah.
If there's someone else that can make it better, then that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Do it, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I send stuff off to people all the time. You know, I can play guitar, but doesn't mean I'm the right person for that particular song or the whole album. If I'm not right, I'll give it to somebody else because you've got to know what your strengths and your weaknesses are.
Absolutely. That's a very good point.
Yeah, but there are no rules. You can do whatever the hell you want, and now you can do it in a way and that you don't have to spend a fortune, and it's kind of limitless.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So tell me, Matt, when you are playing guitar on a particular record, how do you vision what it should sound like? Like, are you picturing particular guitars or sounds or inspirations from other players, or do you just pick up the first thing that's next to you and go through a few presets on your interface, or like what's your process there?
Yeah, look, it's pretty uneventful and quite simple. I usually just pick up my Jeff Sen Jazz Bastard, which is my go-to guitar, and
it's like an offset Telecaster thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's like a Telecaster, but it looks like a Jazz Master.
Yeah,
and I just love that guitar, and I find that 80% of the time that guitar is going to be totally fine for what I'm doing. And I don't know, a Telecaster just resonates with me. You know, I just love the sound of them. So it's very simple. I usually it's not a great deal of thought really goes into it. I usually don't. I find that if I record a particular sound, I'll hardly ever go back and change it. I really can't imagine recording a whole bunch of guitar parts and then going back and tweaking amps, simulators, and what's going to work and what's not. I think if you're playing a part, it's the sound that you're getting is going to influence the way you play, the way it fits inside the song, and 99 times out of 100, that's the sound. Yeah. And I don't have a lot of electric guitars anyway. So I've got that. I've got a Jeff Sen Strat, a 6-string bass, baritone guitar, and a couple other things. But the palette isn't huge. But yeah, there's I think, and the same would probably be for most musicians. There's not really a lot of thought that goes into it. Really, it's just you pick it up and see what comes out. Yep. Sometimes I'll have an idea in my head, but for the most part, I'll just start and see where it takes me. Great. Yeah.
And tell me about these guitars you're talking about. What's the name of the maker? Jeff Sen.
Jeff Sen. Jeff Sen lives in Nashville. Right. And he makes a Strat and a Tele, essentially. Mm-hmm. He's since branched out and has done a few different other types of guitars. But he would make these guitars just one at a time, make them, and then basically just put it out to the world, and the first person to get in would get it. Yep. Keith Urban, Jed Hughes, Glenn Hanna, and Sam Hawksley, lots of guys over there use them. Okay. Rob McNally, who's an amazing Nashville guitarist, he uses them as well. And so I had enough people in Nashville telling me, mostly Sam Hawksley, you've just got to get this guitar, you will love it. Sure. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. Tell me what to buy. Yeah. And if I can, I'll do it. Yeah. So that's become my like number one guitar.
Great.
Yeah.
Did you have to import these, or is there like someone in Australia who can?
Oh, well, I went over to Nashville and I was producing some records over there, and so I just brought it back with me.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, which is the way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you spent much time in Nashville?
I have. I've probably done maybe 4 trips over there producing.
Mm-hmm.
Always working with Australian artists.
Right.
So a while ago, I saw how many people were going over to Nashville to record, and how many of them were coming back with really average sounding records.
Yeah.
That sounded like they'd been just run through a machine, and it kind of bugged me, and I thought, well, and it was nothing against the people that were making them. It was just that any record has to be, someone has to be in the driver's seat, and this has to be someone who cares.
Yeah.
And I know what it's like being in that environment as a session musician, and if you're showing up for work, and especially in Nashville where they're doing sessions all the time.
Yeah.
You know, someone's got to be there to steer the ship.
Yep.
And so I started thinking, well, I'm going to start going over there and taking Australian artists with me, because they've got a dream to record in Nashville, and why not? It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
But I can hopefully, obviously not in all cases, but in some cases when the results weren't great, I thought, well, in that case, I can show them, I can steer the ship and make sure that they come back with something they're really happy with.
Yep.
And they can get the Nashville experience.
Yep.
And everybody wins.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I loved it. It was a real buzz getting to work with those players.
Are these people that you've worked with previously?
Well, not the first couple of times. I didn't know any of them.
Wow.
And I remember I'd been thinking about it, and I thought before we started, and I thought, what can I do to make this feel a bit different for them? And I remember we did a take, and it was all sounding fine. And I went into the studio and I opened up all the doors, because there was like 5 different booths.
Sure.
And I opened all the doors up and I go, let's go again from the top.
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah, but we need to close the doors because there's going to be a lot of bleed.
Yeah.
And I was like, exactly. So let's do it again, and we're all going to have to get it right at the same time, and let's just give it a try. And instantly they were like, awesome, great. And they were taken out of their comfort zone, and it just was a different vibe, and it just got a bit more, that 10% more exciting. And yeah, it was cool. And I mean, I love working there because the players are so great.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just so good at what they do. And they have to be so fast. And if they're put in hopefully an inspiring situation, not that every session I've done in Nashville has been that at all, but most of the time it's really good fun. And I don't know, it's just a huge buzz for me.
Yeah.
And it's a great. I don't necessarily love the town. It's nice, but in terms of being a producer or a musician, it's a great place to be. And not that I regret it, but I should have gone there when I was a lot younger.
Yeah, right.
I just, I just had I did too many sessions there where the players would come up to me afterwards and they're like, man, what are you doing? You should be here.
Yeah.
You belong here. This is where you need to be. And they were right. I could feel it. I was like, it's the perfect place to be if you're doing what we do a lot of the time.
Yeah. It definitely seems like the melting pot of a lot of music, not necessarily country or Americana. Like, it's just sort of seems like it's become, probably not nowadays, but maybe 5-10 years ago, it seemed like an affordable place to live. Music was like on the top of the cultural, identity of Nashville.
Yeah.
Maybe not full of record execs anymore. Maybe just it's like a blue collar kind of like muso town with some great rooms and a history. God, the history of Nashville is insane.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody listening to this will know what this is like, and you and I would have experienced this growing up, becoming an adult, and you have the conversation with your Uncle Dave. It's like, what do you do? What are you doing for a job? Well, I'm a musician. Yeah, but I know, but how are you making money?
Yeah.
Like, when are you going to grow up?
Yeah.
And get a real job? All that crap,
Yeah.
in a place like Nashville, it's like, what do you do? I'm a producer. It's like, cool. Who are you? What are you doing?
Sure.
You know, it's a totally different environment to what we experience here.
Yeah.
It's just everywhere. It just permeates every area of that place.
Yeah.
So it's pretty exciting, you know, from that point of view.
Yeah. And to be like saturated with music, you walk down the street, there's bar bands playing everywhere. There's people writing songs in offices like all day, every day. You know,
Yeah.
it's just, it's for me as a Tasmanian kid to think of that as a reality. It's just
it's
mind-blowing.
otherworldly, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I grew up in a small town too. You know, it's just like
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's really cool. But I suppose in this modern day, we can still stay home and use, like, I'm sure there are studios that you can ship your product to.
Yeah.
They can produce something and send it back to you in like a few hours' time.
Yeah, and I send parts off to friends in Nashville all the time.
Yep.
Or Austin.
Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to be able to do that. I've had days. I remember I had one day I was working on a Brad Butcher record, and in one day we had stuff come in from the Gold Coast, Cooma, which is in New South Wales, cold New South Wales, Nashville, Austin, London, and New York. All in the one day. There's parts coming in from everywhere.
Wow.
It's like, how fantastic is this? No one had to get on a plane with a 2-inch under their arm.
Yeah.
It's magic, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's such a wonderful advantage of the technology we have. Yeah.
But, you know, it comes back to that thing, though, when you are in a place like Nashville and there's studios everywhere and you don't even know that there's studios everywhere most of the time because they're in houses everywhere.
Yeah.
And, you know, 5,000 times in one day there's a band in a room together bouncing ideas off each other and making music.
Yeah.
That's, you know, pretty cool. But last time I was in Nashville too, I talked to a lot of players and they were saying that dynamic was changing a lot as well, that there was a lot less of that.
Sure.
It was becoming a lot more producer-oriented.
Yep.
Producer-songwriter-oriented.
Yep.
Where the songwriter demos would become the record.
Right.
So it's interesting.
It's interesting, the times we live in,
Yeah.
and the way that music's constantly evolving, you know, the whole TikTok thing now, and like just music's just, I guess it's always going to be elements of strong roots music. It's always going to be a continual, but the pop sort of cultural music on top is always going to be, testing the boundaries, no doubt, and coming from different elements of our world.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I've said this to a few people, and they think I'm crazy, but I actually think that we're in a golden age of pop music right now. I think pop is like, if you look at what pop music was like when we were kids in the 80s and 90s, in order to be heard, you had to get signed by a major label. You had to record in a big studio. The only way you were going to be successful was if that company spent a shit ton of money on you.
Yeah.
And you did the expensive film clips but most importantly, that you got onto mainstream radio.
Yes.
Which is it's a tiny, tiny funnel. When we consider the destination that is commercial radio, it's eye of a needle compared to what's being put into it. I listen to a lot of the stuff that my daughter plays me, and I'm just continually blown away by how much better pop music is now than it has been, in my opinion, at any time. That's now, having said that, if I say that, then that sounds like I'm also talking about the Beatles and everything else.
Yeah.
I think we can put in a little caveat there that it obviously it's never going to get better than that.
Yeah.
And it's easy when you look back in history to cherry pick the great stuff and go, well, come on. I mean, Tom Petty, how can you tell me that it's better now?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that everything is better now, but in the sense that people are creating amazing music and constantly pushing boundaries, and music is becoming successful that isn't boring and playing by the rules.
It's not fitting to a radio brief.
That's right, or a record, or doing what I've got to do to get signed by a record deal, or signed by a record label.
Yeah.
The rules have gone out the window.
Yeah.
And with that comes really exciting music.
I agree.
So I don't know. There's such great stuff being made at the moment, and people are doing it in their bedrooms.
Absolutely.
And it sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's where it's hard is if you're a niche. Now that people can't survive off CD sales and everything else, if you're a niche artist and if you're doing roots music, which is a lot of what I'm doing. I mean, I'm glad I'm not an artist. I can't imagine how tough it must be. I don't know how they make a living doing it, and most of them don't.
Yeah.
So there's good and bad in every direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's always been the way. There's always a good and a bad from every perspective over musical history.
Yeah.
One more thing before we go. Speaking about music of your own, have you ever had the need to write your own material and write your own, record your own thing? Like, you've supported so many great players, writers, so many great records. I know you put a good element of yourself onto all of those projects, but have you ever considered like putting the guitar on and making a Matt Fell record?
Absolutely not.
No?
No way. Can't think of anything worse. And I'll explain why. Because I've made so many records, and a lot of them, I made a lot of really shitty records that only exist because someone has saved up enough money, and their family and friends are going to hear them, and that's it.
Yeah. Okay.
They serve a purpose in the sense that they're there for them because they've written these songs, and they should absolutely. How fantastic is it that they can turn that into something tangible?
Preserve that.
Yeah. Beautiful. It's a wonderful thing. Yeah. It doesn't mean that it's going to sound any good, but because maybe they're not that great, but they also keep people like us in work. I've made so many of those records that I refused to ever put an extra one into the world. And if I did do a record, it would be one of those records. Because I am not a songwriter, and I'm not a singer. I can sing, but it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, right.
But you know what? It's really funny because the other day I started getting this song into my head, and I came up with like a whole verse. I was like, where the fuck did that come from?
Like, stop it.
Oh, shit, I'm going to have to record this now. So who knows? Maybe I will. I was also in a band with my ex-wife years ago called Butterfly 9, and we had a record deal and did the whole thing.
Right.
And we supported Counting Crows on the national tour. They handpicked us to do the thing. And,
wow, okay.
And we came about as close as you can get to having a radio hit in Australia. But everything went wrong. Just bad luck everywhere you looked.
Right.
And I'm really proud of the records that Susie and I made. They're really good. We did some really great stuff, and I loved making them. But 3 months doing radio promo tours and going into boardrooms and buying pizza for radio execs and all of the other stuff that came along with being an artist just killed me. I hated every single second of it. And that completely removed any desire for me to be an artist. Because I've got the perfect scenario. I get to be involved in the fun part of it.
Yeah.
And then when it's done, it walks out the door, and I don't ever have to see it again if I don't want to. It's fantastic. And the artist can go and do all the interviews and do all that stuff.
Yeah. With the face.
Yeah.
Of the product, and you just.
That's right. And for me, it's long gone, and I got to be a part of the enjoyable bit.
Yeah.
Sure, you may not get the millions of dollars and the adulation and all the rest of it, but I wouldn't say no to the millions of dollars, but I don't need the ego boost. One of the most valuable lessons I learned as a musician and as a producer was actually working with Tim Friedman. I did his solo record about 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And he was so... I'd never worked with someone that was so brutally honest in their appraisal and in their opinions. And at first I was really taken aback by it.
To his own work or to his own creativity or to
others? Like we were doing the record together and he
Right.
would tell me something was shit.
Okay.
You know, and he'd just say it out loud.
Yep.
You know, and I was taken aback and I was like, wasn't used to people doing that. But then I kind of thought about it for a bit and got used to it. And then I fell in love with it because I realized that ego does not belong in music. Like, it has zero place, especially in a recording studio.
Yeah.
It just does not belong. And that completely changed everything for me working with Tim, because I realized that where he was coming from was a pure place.
Yep.
And he was not interested in anything other than the creativity, getting a good result.
Yep.
And he's a good person. He wasn't being mean. He was just telling the truth.
Yep.
He wasn't insulting me or being mean to me. It was just
Yep.
like, this is how it is.
Yep.
And yeah, that was an incredible thing to learn. And so that gets you to a pure place when it comes to music. Yeah.
Yep. I think it takes time though, doesn't it, as a professional or even just as an adult or as a person, just getting to that point where you can call something shit and be okay with that. You're not worried about people's opinions or about your own pedestal that you might have built for yourself. You know, it's just a natural evolution, hopefully.
Yeah. If you're serving the song and you're being also, you've got to be a decent human being.
Yes.
But I've found that the difficult scenarios when it comes to making music are when people are insecure. It's usually not about that their ego is a problem. It's just that their insecurity.
Yeah.
Or other personal demons or problems. But if you can remove all of that stuff and just focus on what you're all there to do, which is to make good art.
Yep.
Then that's the place you want to be. It's fantastic.
Yep, totally.
Yeah.
What's happening at the moment in your world in terms of, are there any records that you have coming out or are out at the moment that you're sort of super stoked on, you want to sort of get out there?
Yeah, I'm recording the new Felicity Urquhart and Josh Cunningham record, which we're doing completely remotely, but that's sounding really great. I'm really loving that. You mentioned Graham Connors before. I'm doing his new record.
Oh, cool.
He was down here a few weeks ago.
Yep.
The Whitlam's Black Stump Band, I'm putting together a record for them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited for Fanny Lumsden's new album to come out. That's long since finished, but that was recorded here and at your place, and that's being released in August.
Great.
But what I'm actually really looking forward to is actually taking a little bit of time off doing this. We're opening an accommodation business here at this property, and I'm gonna put my hand to running an accommodation business. And I haven't earned a cent my whole life from anything other than music. Apart from when I was in high school, I washed dishes one night in a restaurant, and the owner, who was a friend, sacked me and said, "You are a far better musician than you are a kitchen hand.
Get out."
I'll give you a gig playing here every second Saturday night." And I thought, I quite literally took that as a sign.
Right.
And thought, I'm never going to do anything else. This is going to be my only job forever.
That's so good.
Yeah, and I managed to do it,
Yeah.
I had to do a lot of really shitty gigs to do it, but at least I did what I set out to do, which was to only do music.
Yep.
But especially in the last 10 years, with the more success that I've had as a producer, with that came probably a bit too much work.
Yeah.
And it's not lost to me how lucky I am or fortunate I am to have that problem. It's a great problem to have. But I am looking forward to being more selective and just doing the records that I really want to do.
Great.
And I think I'll have a much better time doing them.
Yep.
Because of that.
Yep.
And why not try something different?
Yeah, I think diversity's a wonderful thing. If you can sort of spend a chunk of your time doing something 180 degrees opposite from music, it gives you a different perspective and a clearer mind, perhaps when you are involved in music. And look, I'm the same. I think I pumped fuel for about 6 months at my local gas station when I was a kid. Must have been like 14, and I hated it. It just wasn't for me. And I've just made music my whole life as well. So so I can't really talk about diversity, but I guess I have diversity in my skill set. I don't just perform. I do some recording, do some producing, do some tutoring with a local school. So I'm sort of diversifying within my skill set, but I'm like, to actually go and like do something that isn't involving music would be quite daunting.
Yeah.
But exciting.
And I'm excited about it. And look, at the very worst, I think what I'll get out of the experience is just realising that, well, after dealing with the general public, the music industry isn't so bad after all, is it? No, I'm just kidding.
It's like that quote, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Hunter S. Thompson.
What's the quote about him? Like,
oh, yeah.
Is it that quote that I was thinking of? The music business is a cruel and shallow money trench, a long plastic hallway where thieves and pimps run free and good men die like dogs. There's also a negative side.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that I've managed to, in my career, really remove myself from the industry in a lot of ways. Like, because that's where I feel really sorry for artists all the time that are in that world.
Yep.
And there's obviously very good people in that world too, but that's tough stuff.
Tough stuff. Yeah, I'm definitely happy to be on the creative side of that.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, Matt, well, I reckon we'll leave it with that little quote from Hunter S. Thompson. And thanks again for the chat. And look forward to catching up again soon.
My pleasure, man. It was fun.
All right. Thanks for listening, folks, to another episode of Say It With Guitars. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast, share it around to your mates, leave a good review, and hopefully we'll see you next time.